And welcome to the DefSec 2023 podcast, sponsored by Cisco. I'm Alan Dale. With me, as always, my good buddy Jerry Crew. We are Gale Force Winds. Debbie, we've been in conversation for quite some time over the last number of years. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're all about.
Absolutely. And first of all, I'm delighted to be here. Like you said, I've been watching what you're doing, and it's just phenomenal. Um, I'm a veteran, first and foremost. I love to say that, although my daughter will say you should say your mom first. From Upper Island Cove, Newfoundland. Left there in 1980 as the first cohort of women to become a mechanic, and quite proud of that. I had to leave the military after 11 years because I'm legally blind, and it was like a quick chop back then in 1991. Not an easy transition, and it took me about 10 years to land on my feet.
Really?
I went to university in my 40s. I'm 60 now, I don't mind saying. Graduated when I was 45, had a year of law school. Some mechanic was in law school, got a degree, and still couldn't get a job. Lots of barriers to the labor market. And it's mostly the driving thing that was a challenge. Plus, back in those days when you left, it's not like today where you leave with supports, but back in those days you left in poverty really with 11 years in. Anyway, kept going back to school until I figured out something that I could do, and it started out with, I thought I'd do coaching in the oil and gas industry, ended up doing income tax, if you can imagine. I had a little storefront for a while, figured out the blue collar guys needed business skills, and it started from there. Bidding on tenders, whatever they needed, literally. Write a grant, yes, I can do that. I needed the money, we'll figure it out. Anyway, that's where I am, and I love it.
So that was quite a journey
Yes.
to get to where you are. Tell us about those early days in the military, what that was like for you.
Loved it.
Tell me about it.
Absolutely loved it. I was 17, grew up in a bit of chaos. My mother had traumatic brain injury when I was 12. And, just rural Newfoundland life was difficult anyway. Not well off by any means. Working class family, but, the lower end of the working class family. Joined the military and that became home. It was like, I can't talk too much about it because I'll get a little emotional, but
Right.
I loved it.
Yeah.
The Army.
The Army, yes.
Two Navy guys talking to someone from the Army.
I know, you're about to get an education about what the military is really like.
So you were a mechanic?
I was a mechanic, and a very traditional woman coming from rural Newfoundland, and then went in was expected to be non-traditional. Of course, it was hard going in the beginning for a lot of people, but I think the edge that Newfoundlanders have, and I don't mind claiming that, is that we get along with people. We figure it out, and I was likable. So I ended up with amazing supervisors, and we went through a cohort with 11 women and got posted to Edmonton, all of us, got our training, and then once we were qualified, I got sent off to Dundurn, Saskatchewan.
Wow.
Out of the middle of nowhere, half an hour from Saskatoon, the first woman, 39 men.
How old were you at this point?
I would be 18 by now.
18.
18. And I spent 6 years in Saskatchewan, where I did very, very well. I remustered and went to Ottawa, and it was there that, again, doing exceptionally well. I was an exemplary soldier, and being fast-tracked through some of the training, going to be posted in Germany with the RCR, being an Army girl, and doing well, doing well. New to Ottawa, getting screened to go over. It was like during the first Persian Gulf War, screened to go over to Turkey to hand out food supplies, and I get a medical. And in the middle of the medical, which I drove to in my brand new Monte Carlo, I just want to throw that in there,
You sure?
And he said, "You're legally blind."
Did you knew some things were
No.
going on with your eyes?
No, I want you.
No?
That's right. No, I was on fast track to leadership, looking at a CFR. There was a real career plan.
Yep.
And no. As a matter of fact, must we refrain from foul language? Is that prohibited? I
It's
just
up
say
to
it.
you, Debbie.
When I went to the doctor that day, because a lot of us were screened to go.
Yeah.
By this time, I'm working in R&D, helping people go overseas and whatnot. And the doctor came around the desk, put put his hand on my leg, and in true humor, I'm thinking, oh, who's your daddy? You know, doctor wouldn't be bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, he said, I could tell the man was ready to cry, and he said, I'm going to send you for more tests, but the early findings are you have lost your peripheral vision. Didn't
Yeah.
even know it.
Wow.
Anyway, that set the ball in motion for a review. And because I couldn't fire a weapon, I needed to leave.
Right. What an
Yeah,
abrupt stop, right?
yeah.
How does one recover from that?
Well-
How do you pick the pieces up? Because you've clearly got a path. You're on your way to an adventure, and how do
Yeah.
you pick the pieces up from there?
And not easily. So it took me 10 years to
Yeah,
gain my footing because I didn't have that safety net to go back to. It wasn't like, let's just go home. You know, call it like it was. I was still supporting my family back home,
yeah,
financially and otherwise. And it wasn't a place where you went back to get healing. And, you know, because of the situation. Yeah, it took a long time. And a lot of work. And the trauma was the way that I was released, not
Yeah.
an injury from service.
Right.
So, you know, I was on my own for that. I was on my own for that. So it led to mental health challenges and questioning who you are. And back then, inculcated with that old, that whole notion of being a unit and you're such a valuable cog in the wheel until you're not. And then nobody knew back then. I mean, we didn't even have the language to be able to talk about transition, but nobody knew. I mean, I have had so much education around this now that, I could teach it, but I was new to Ottawa. My boss, the chief from Saskatoon says, if you were here, we would have got the career mentor and make a different decision. But I didn't have the deep roots in Ottawa yet for anyone to go to bat. So, and they saw this report that says she's legally blind. I was an admin clerk, for God's sake, and a high-performing admin clerk. There were people that have stayed in with, anyway, won't go there. But, yeah, I think once you've been shown a good life, you get a bit of help to get over all of that. You always want to scratch your way back to that, don't you?
Yeah.
You're not going to settle for, what you're capable of. You've had a little bit of a glimpse. So, yeah, I started with university at 40.
wow. And so, if I look at your online presence now, and here we are, the book in front of
The
us.
fourth book.
Fourth
The
book
fourth.
in front of us, that's quite a transition from having the
It is.
rug pulled out from under you to kind of going back to school and reestablishing life. Could you have done it without those experiences?
Not a chance. I always say that, I've had a couple of traumas in my life, and when people ask me about them, they're still wrong, and that'll never go away. I don't think you're human if you, push your way through everything. You shouldn't do that anyway. But they have become like the portals to post-traumatic growth for me. So I would not be this Debbie, because I was pretty much like a bit of a people pleaser. You can imagine. A lot of people in the military do it exceptionally well. We're very good at following rules.
Mm-hmm.
Entrepreneurs cannot follow rules. We need to make our own, So I would not have been able. I was a reluctant and forced entrepreneur because of poverty. Nowhere along, in the first 5 years, if somebody would have come along and said, Debbie, this is like $60,000, we'll hire you today, I don't care what it is, just show me how to do it. That would have been good enough. And then I recognized my capacity, and along the way, I recognized that most people are operating at about 20% of their capacity. So I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to take everything that I've learned in those tough places, make it a worthwhile journey by telling everybody what I've learned. So that's what I do.
So tell us exactly what you do. Tell us exactly
Well,
what your business model is.
Honest to God, along the way, when you're in the beginning, you're just trying to get a bit of money coming in. So you're like saying yes to stuff you don't really know how to do. So it started with graduating from university, applying for 3,000 jobs into government, whoever could accommodate a visually impaired person, because they do need accommodation, yeah. That didn't work, so I got down over that, and it ended me up in counseling. And it was, I met a man who was a disabled entrepreneur, and I thought, mother of dying, if he can do it, surely to God I can do it. So I started to do income tax. And I was really good at bossing people around. I'm good at income tax. I don't love it, but it paid the bills, you know. And I was doing this home base for a while, but nobody really knew me. And I was doing courses in the community for the at-risk adults. Really, you know, people have not had an opportunity to be educated formally or otherwise. So I was going out in the community teaching people how to keep their books, and then I was doing mediation with CRA to get people on side with their anything and everything. And I went to Ottawa and presented at a Women's World conference. They paid for me to come, and I talked about the education of at-risk adults. So at 40, when I went to university, man, I didn't know how to use a calculator. Like that, yeah, that first year was wicked. I think I burned through a couple of dictionaries trying to understand what in the hell they're saying.
Yeah.
With them big old words and stuff. So anyway, I developed a real respect for people. And you know, as veterans, in the Second World War, half of them were illiterate. You know, more than half of them were illiterate. And look what they've done for democracy. My degree is in political science, and I've been to law school, so I know a little bit about policy and all of this kind of stuff. So I developed along the way through that education a passion for the disadvantaged. Not necessarily like not having any money, but not having access to power.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, you know, carve out a place for yourself. Because we're not connected. Like when I was at law school, I was a visually impaired student. There was another visually impaired student, and he said to me, "Did you disclose that coming in?" And I said, "Well, you know I did. You know, I had to tell him I had to get in."
Yeah.
And I said, "Did you disclose that your father was on the Superior Court in Ontario? Now let's not call us equal."
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he was so proud not to have disclosed this situation, but he didn't see the similarities between us, you know. So anyway, back to the taxes. I'm doing taxes at home. I'm making a bit of money, 10 grand, you know, which was a lot with Canada Pension Disability. Imagine, I felt like I was a rich woman. And when I got out, we didn't make a ton of money in the military. So we'll say in 91, it was not the place to go if you wanted to make money. People started coming through the door with different problems, you know. One fellow wanted to go to small claims court. I'm like, I did a year. I can do that up for you. And then he said, "Can you present it?" "Yeah, I'll do that too." So that was it. I'll put that on the list. Went to Ottawa to this Women's Worlds, and I told him about my story up till that point. Little did I know I'd have 20 more years to add to it, right? And somebody there from Labrador said, "We need a grant written." I said, "I don't tell lies, you know, I'm that person." And I said, "Did you hear me say I wrote grants? Like, did I say something that made you think that?" And they said, no, but if you can tell a story that good, you can write what we're trying to say. And so it was an Indigenous or an Inuit group, and I did it. And they got like more than $1 million renewable for 10 years, just saying.
Wow.
So now on the thing, check the box, I write grants. They're not going to say how many have you written, and I say one.
But it was a good one. A really good one.
You're picking up what I'm laying down.
Yeah.
I started to get like cute about this stuff like before I was my own worst enemy, because I remember disqualifying myself for a job early on. A half-decent job, paying $35,000 or $40,000 a year, which I thought was a lot of money. I didn't make that in the military.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know Lotus. And that was on the list, and I was like, no. Oh, I can't apply for that. I don't know Lotus. Now I could care less what I don't know. I know somebody who knows it. And so I figured that out. And now I teach that to people and help them to leverage their way through stuff. So over the years, I picked up a lot of competencies, gone back to school and learned. I took a mediation course. I took adult education from St. Max. I've been at every university. I'm an addict. I'll never stop learning. But everything I learn, I teach it the next day. Next day, course,
Sorry.
bam. Oh, yeah.
A thirst for knowledge, equally as thirsty to pass it on.
Oh, probably more thirsty to pass it on. But what I have learned along the way is she ain't no fool. And not passing it on for free.
Right.
Charging large for the value I bring to the market. If I'm going to make an impact in your life that's bringing you $500,000, you're darn well going to be paying me for it.
Yeah, understand your value, right?
Right.
That's a very important thing.
But we didn't know that.
Yeah,
I understood my value to somebody else.
yeah.
But nowhere along the line did I instill that I had value in and of myself, separate from the organization.
Yeah.
4 books. Tell us about the 4 books.
First book, I love my first book I wrote in a week. So it was 2011 and I needed a bit of money. And I went to this talk about this fellow was writing books and he said, I wrote this in a week. I locked myself in the room, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, that's it, I'll have a book next Friday. And I wrote, because I had worked a bit in occupational health and safety in the military when it first came in. I was prior to that, like implementing it. And I wrote a book, Single Again, Now What? A Practical Guide to Meaningful Connection, about online dating safety for seniors, and I sold it to seniors. Here's how to put up your profile. You're going to meet all kinds of people in there. I won't mention them. But anyway, you need to be a little bit safe.
Yeah.
Protect your money, protect yourself. And I did that in the community. And I got enough money to build a website for my little tax business.
Wow.
500 books I sold. I was not interested in that topic as a career.
No.
I was interested in fast cash. I asked my friends to give me, it was a $1,200 from start to finish, cover to cover. And I asked my friends, give me $1,200, give me $100. And one day I'll give it back to you. And they said, don't give it back to us. Someday you give it to somebody else.
Wow. Second book.
I didn't have a cent. Second book was Money Mindset, Why Changing My Mind About Money Helped Me to Succeed as an Entrepreneur. And it talked about that, how I had to face my own, in the early days I couldn't charge. I couldn't charge. Like, somebody said, oh, that should be $6,000. And I'm like, man, oh man, that took me an hour and a half. Like, I just can't do that. It doesn't seem right. But then again, the industry don't want you to be the one that undercuts everybody. You have to be. So I had to do a lot of work around that, because the military it's really premised on the heart to serve, and I love it. Not dishing the military. They had a terrible exit plan, but loved the military. It was all about service, and I was all about service. But business about profit, right? And if you want to be claiming your expenses, you need to be interested in profit. And I thought the two couldn't exist together. I thought if I became profit-centered, I would give up service.
Right.
But what I know is you can charge large for the value to bring to the market and be 100% service-oriented, and they're not mutually exclusive. Like, that anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, the more you serve, the better. So, yeah.
And third book.
Dreaming Big, Being Bold.
Tell me about it.
It was an anthology with a bunch of business coaches across Canada, much like myself, who took their crap story and translated it into a story that somebody else could use. Let's see if we can shorten the runway for somebody else who's going through a hard time. Say just short little. And this is number 4. Yeah.
The Law of Attraction for the Skeptic. Tell me about it.
So along the way, the courses that I had started to take to push back against all of this resistance, I had the money, and coming from a background of people who never had more month than money, and maybe all of those sayings like, he's getting rich on the backs of the poor, and all the stuff that we're conditioned to believe. I started to read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and then travel around and study Bob Proctor for a year, and I started to get ass good at it. Just saying. And I started to think people need to learn this. They need to learn about their own inner. To give you an example of exactly what I'm saying, I put a post up this morning, and it said that, do you ever hear tell people that win $1 million, and then they're broke in a year? And the only thing going wrong is that their internal set point is not a millionaire, right? And they get $1 million, they haven't got a clue what to do. And it's like the person who loses 100 pounds, and then 3 years later, they're right back up there again. Because internally, we have something that's driving us to produce the results that we see today. And if we want to change those results, you don't need more education, which is what I was doing, more education and another skill. But what I needed was to change my mind about myself. And I was just pushed far enough to the wall that I became an entrepreneur and convinced myself of that. The first business cards I got printed, you know, and it said CEO, somebody put that on there, and I'm like, oh my God, you got to take that off. Like, I'm not even a business owner yet. But then I wasn't a soldier on day one either, was I?
No.
I had to morph into that. So,
I got a question for you. There's
yes,
a
my
lot of
darling.
employers that are watching this, and what advice would you give them about hiring someone with a visual impairment or any other disability?
Oh,
I mean, that's a big one, I know, but
yes.
is there some advice you could give the employers that I'm sure are wondering?
Yes. Yes, 100%. I love talking about this topic. We're loyal, right? Like, by the time we get to somebody who's going to hire us, we have been through a lot of stuff. We're never leaving. But we have mad skills. So what if I need you to help me to get up to the table? Once I'm at the table and got my computer in front of me, I'm like your best employer. Most of the people out there that are living with disabilities and looking for work have a little belief in themselves that they can do the job. They're not saying they can do something they can't do, but they may do it differently. You know, I've worked with so many organizations here in the city that help disabled people, and some of those people, I mean, they're blown through straws to get around, but when they sit down to do their thing, whatever their widget is, they are fierce about that. So I know that employers don't want to, sometimes you got to dish out a bit of dough. Maybe you need a ramp. Maybe you need somebody else in the workplace to help that person out. There are ways you can get around that. At the same time, the bigger corporations can get around that easier. Smaller corporations hire on somebody with a, you know, little sole proprietor with I have a couple of VAs. It's hard for me to accommodate. There is a duty to accommodate, but it can only be to the point of underwardship. So enter the law school.
Yeah.
Right. So you know, I'm cognizant of that. But I always say to the disabled people, you just go to the people with the deep pockets to find work. Like you can't go in the door, and he'd love to hire you, but he just can't pay like 1.5 times what he would pay somebody else, kind of thing. So yeah, but I will tell, disabled people does not mean, so disabled at your thing. So I always still identify as a mechanic because it's where I had the most time, and I wasn't really entrenched in the admin world yet. I was just getting a bit of admin. The goal was to someday get CFR in the admin side or policy side. So I was doing that strategically. So I was a mechanic, and I thought all I could do was like be a soldier, be a mechanic, follow orders really, really well, all that jazz. And here I am. And I'm thinking, I could have applied for jobs in lots of places because what I did have but didn't know and didn't recognize, and nobody had really ever told me, was a phenomenal ability to learn stuff. Anything, right? Like, I'm not saying I want to do brain surgery, but I could break it down. I've rebuilt an engine. I could, like, you know what, I maneuver my way around in there. Might not want me to do it, but you know what I mean? So people are out there with, like, there must have been a time when you didn't know you were going to be a videographer and podcaster and stuff. Could you ever have imagined that at one time?
Yeah,
But you learned it.
you're right.
And it don't matter how old you are, how able-bodied you are, as long as you have capacity to do the things or pay someone to do the things.
What had me at loyalty. That's a big one.
Yeah,
You think,
100%. No, 100%. We often ask people that come on the podcast, people who've had an interesting journey, like yours, to leave the audience with a piece of advice. Well, what would a piece of advice be that you would give people?
Oh, I think that everybody out there is sitting around thinking about something they wish they could do. Maybe they want to open an hair salon in the basement, or they might want to just leave it all, let it blow up, and go to Thailand. And I do it. Just do it. Your satisfaction with life is on the other side of being uncomfortable for a little bit. And we have an amazing capacity to be uncomfortable. The real goal is over there. Because I got to tell you, aside from a teary moment when I lost a place that I call family, you know, I'm living my best life. I'm 60 and I'm going to the best decade ever. Best.
Wow. Jerry, your thoughts?
You were the second entrepreneur that told me that their lives have been enhanced by being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I get it. Creating something can be very uncomfortable. You are an inspiration. Your positivity, everything that you've done on LinkedIn exudes positivity. The 4 books you've written. It's an absolute pleasure to sit with you today and listen to you talk. Thank you for being here.
100%. Debbie, I can't thank you enough. What a great conversation. It's been a few years in the work to sit at this table to have this conversation. So glad that you were able to join us here at the DefSec show, because your story as a military person and how you started has deep roots in here. People will resonate with that story, but you're having great success. It's your best decade ever. Keep on going. And I like to leave the podcast often with my own thoughts, my own piece of advice, and that is quite simply, the world definitely needs more Debbie Adams.
I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, guys.